I am.
Hello, welcome everyone. And I would like to get started a little bit and talk to you about our program today, CELF-5 Metalinguistics, Language Competence and Classroom Success. And the authors here are Elizabeth Wigg and Wayne Secord. But, with all due respect, the leader of our team and the one who guides us and gives us the great vision of where we go is Elizabeth H. Wigg. She has been a genius all of her life, and I thank her for allowing me as her co-author and giving us strategies for where we should go. So you're stuck with me for today, okay? And you're going to have, I hope that you think that I wanted to make the title of this CELF-5 Metalinguistics, Language Competence and Classroom Success. Let's get practical. So we're going to try to get a little more practical today. So, like any ASHA accredited program, we have to disclose any financial connections that we might have. I am the presenter here, and I do have some financial disclosures because I make an income I make royalties from the sale of the CELF-5 test of metalinguistics. I don't have any really non-financial relationships. Pearson Clinical Assessment course content will focus mainly on CELF-5 metalinguistics, secondarily on some other things, maybe CELF-5 a spec, okay? But we do make an income from this, and I must be honest about that. So let's move together today a little bit and talk a little bit about since we're going to talk about language assessment, I want to get as practical as everything. So let's talk about language assessment questions. This is what we do. We want to find out typically, is there a language disorder? What is its nature? And what are the language strengths and weaknesses? When I look at what is its nature, we know receptive, expressive, listening, speaking. Is it syntax, morphology, semantics? Is it language and memory? Is it metalinguistic competence? And we take a look over to the right side of here about the different kinds of scores that we obtain or the methods that we go through in assessment to determine the degree of these language assessment questions. Core language score, we love that because it tells us yes or no, he's got a problem or not. And then we try to figure out its nature by the different index scores that we have on the test. And then we also, when we look at strengths and weakness, we will do some profiling of subtest strengths and weaknesses. You'll see that as we get into case studies. So let's move on. We have a clinical perspective when we do assessment. We want to know, frankly, quite simply, is there evidence of a language disorder here? What's its nature? What's the nature of this problem? What are its language strengths? What are its language weaknesses? And what are its major components? How does the student's performance compare with his peers? And that's his educational level of performance compared to his age and grade. And then, quite simply, does the student's clinical performance profile meet the measurement criteria for eligibility for speech and language services? That's all of this normal curve information. But it's critical because you have to make that decision. Then we have an educational perspective. In the education, excuse me, sorry, did I go too fast here? The educational perspective. That is, what aspects of communication and context are compromised, such as pragmatics or nonverbal communication? What aspects of academic performance are compromised in listening, speaking, reading, writing, and today especially in metalinguistic competence, the ability to be able to think about what you're thinking about. Question 3, what curriculum objectives are compromised? All the different aspects of the curriculum because you have to relate this there. And then lastly, what are the students' strengths, weaknesses, and learning adjustments? And we'll talk about them later when we do the case studies, strengths, weaknesses, and learning adjustments. Social perspective. What aspects of social communication are compromised? Pragmatics, perspective taking, nonverbal communication. What aspects of interpersonal peer relations are compromised? Friendship, interaction, sharing, participating in conversations and discussions, all that socialization is critical. What aspects of student and adult relationships are compromised? Respect, following directions, managing behavior, etc. And lastly, what areas of social communication at all represent strengths that are good for him? Then there's the cognitive perspective. The cognitive perspective is the one that deals with brain behavior, cognitive considerations, thinking, the interaction of thinking and language, and how important that is in metalinguistics, the metacognition and the metalanguage components that are the ability to use your thinking and your language to think about and do and manipulate and be functional. And then, of course, there's executive functions. Oh, my word, every time I bring up executive functions, I think of all my school psychology friends I worked with. They are just experts in this area. But all these brain behavior things and working memory, the ability, once you have good language and good communication skills, and you can build those and frame those in memory and use that working memory to think with. We talk about this often as skills, language skills, versus language strategies, the strategic way of operating. Then, one of my favorite diagrams of all. I'd like to take a couple seconds to take a look at this, because when you're trying to figure out where you are in this world as a speech-language pathologist, take a look at where you are and how you look at a child, how you look at his intrapersonal variables, and how they are related to his interpersonal variables. I mean, just take a look at these. So when you look at this chart, I think of myself, when we first put it together, we thought, isn't this precious? Just look at linguistic. This is all about us, semantics, syntactic, and pragmatic knowledge. But then brain behavior, the cognitive stuff, all the executive function things, memory, reasoning, and problem solving, and then the interconnection that all of these has to emotional well-being, self-awareness, self-regulation type. Amazing. And the difference of interpersonal variables, school, curriculum, society, the school environment, interactions, and culture. The curriculum, it's a relationship there to grade level, curriculum objectives, and learning outcomes. And then society in general, how all of this fits the skills and strategies of a kid's performance in culture, in their roles and functions, society, and where they function in different settings. If you just stand back from this chart, it is really just a wonderful description of just think how broad our role is as a speech and language pathologist and the roles that we have to work with the other people that bring this map together. I love this. I just love this. So let's get down to what is metalinguistics, okay? And then we're going to make this quick and kind of short a little bit, because I think you kind of know what meta-awareness is, or metalinguistics. It's all about metalinguistic awareness, and it's demonstrated when a student can talk about, can analyze, and think about language independent of the simple, concrete meaning of each word. The abstraction that he can do, and he can think and use his language to manipulate and think with, and to operate in multiple ways. The classic, we use this little illustration, the many meanings of the word bridge, the internal image, extension of Golden Gate Bridge, London Bridge falling down. How about the bridge between us? Russia is tenuous. Can you ever bridge the generation gap? Just think of all the different ways that bridge can be used instead of just something we drive over or cross over. Amazing. But that is metalinguistics at its heart. A research perspective on metalinguistics talks about a few things. Talks about epilinguistic capacity. That's the monitoring of the actual speech production as you go, one moment-to-moment monitoring so that you know what you're saying, what you're thinking about, etc. And then, of course, its connection with metalinguistic awareness, the ability to see words as decontextualized objects and manipulate them and analyze them apart from their content and their production. How efficiently we can do this. This metalinguistic awareness has its foundation with us in semantic and syntactic and pragmatic language competence. Interesting. Now, metalinguistics and literacy. Well, just a couple things. Certainly, it's related to reading comprehension. It's related to teaching multiple meanings and the different ways that you can look at meaning and react to different levels of meaning so you can look at it and take it a different way or say it different ways. Metalinguistic facility is essential, essential in the writing process for composition, revision. As writers choose words, analyze what they're saying. I listen to children say all the time in their claim, well, I did it this way, but I didn't like it. I needed to do it this way and then change it as I got into it, because that ability to reflect on and to operate from moment to moment strategically is the heart of metalinguistic awareness. And then, of course, explicit teaching about language and using language as a tool is important in literacy and all kinds of other aspects of language, but using language as a tool to operate with and think with, really important. So language disorders, and our little thing that we talk about every time Elizabeth and I give a workshop, and the first time we did it, and she said it, I just looked at her and said, this is absolutely the opposite. We were doing an early language one, and we got into early elementary school, and then she talked about second graders, and she said, I'll never forget her in this comment. She talked about that by the time they're in second grade and they have to make it through second grade and prepare to enter third grade, children have to pay the toll at the metalinguistic bridge, because when they hit third grade is no longer just learning to read, learning to write. It's learning to use language. It's using language to learn, using language to write, using language strategically to be able to perform better in school. So, and that's what happens when you're giving kids, and you'll see them, they perform like, say, low average or very mildly on things like CELF-5, and they're doing poorly in school, but they're not qualifying. And then you end up giving our CELF-5 test of metalinguistics, and their scores get much lower because they can't use their language system effectively as a tool, and it shows up there and it shines, gives you the reason for, wow, I almost let him go. Oh, my word. Oh, my word. So metalinguistics and academics, okay? There's some metalinguistic skills that have an impact on academic performance and social interaction. These are the ability to understand just inferential thinking and making predictions, using words with multiple meanings, understanding using abstract or figurative language, humor, sarcasm, formulating different spoken and written sentences with different cultural expectations, and doing it one way or doing it another way. The ability to make adaptations, to adapt content, and to adapt structure to match the context or the cultural expectation or the age or the politeness, to be indirect. Resolving incongruities between linguistic content and nonverbal expressions. my mother used to say to me all the time when I was a kid. She'd say, Wayne, isn't it time to take out the garbage? And I'd go, geez, it's only 4 o'clock. Obviously, I wasn't too meta at the time because she meant take the garbage out right now. Well, let's take a look at some stages of metalinguistic ability. And I love this right here. This part right here is really useful and very everything. So let's just take a look at the broad range of metalinguistics here. Stage 1, age 1.5 to 2. A child distinguishes print from non-print. He knows how to interact with books. And when you're telling him stories, he knows how to hold the book, right side up, page, left to right, and turn. He's got this meta skill to know what to do. Recognizes some printed symbols, for example, TV characters' names and brand names and signs, what they are. I know every time a kid says a big M, he thinks, gee, McDonald's. Are you kidding? A real young kid. Stage 2, ages 2 to 5.5 or 6, and this is the really critical period. This is where they ascertain word boundaries in spoken sentences. They ascertain word boundary in printed sentences. They know where one word and phrase begins and that, like that. They also know how to self-monitor, begin to self-monitor their own speech, and they begin to make changes that more closely associated with adult-level language. Sometimes they're phonological things first in words and sounds, and then semantic style will come down the road later. But they believe that a word is kind of an integral part of the object to which it refers. That's the word realism. The word is that. They're able to separate words into syllables phonologically. They're phonological awareness things. They have an inability, and this is really an important thing, across this time from age 2 to 6, that one word could have 2 meanings. They don't think of a bridge that has 2 meanings. They don't think of bank as a river bank, or a bank as a place where you keep money. And, of course, one good thing about their inability to do that is because they can only have for one meaning, for each meaning, they can only have one word. For every meaning they get, they begin to develop a large vocabulary, especially if they get taken around and they get to socialize and do different things. That's a positive thing, even though it's not adult-like yet. 6 to 10 is the big age where it starts to jump. This is where they begin to take the listener perspective. Think about it. Age 6, first grade, first grade up to 4th, begin to take the listener perspective and use language form to match. They begin to get verbal humor involving linguistic ambiguity. They start to get riddles and things like that. The ability to resolve ambiguity first as homophones, and deep structures next as in ambiguous phrases like, will you join me in a bowl of soup? Phonological or morphemic. What do you have if you put 3 ducks in a box? A box of quackers. They begin to know how to do these kinds of things because they start to be able to use words in strategic different ways. Then, age 6 to 10 continue, they're able to understand that words can have 2 meanings, one literal and the other non-conventional or idiomatic. Adjectives such as describe personality characteristics such as hard and sweet and bitter. I got to tell you, we had a kid in our clinic, and I went in, I was working with him, and I took a lollipop in because his language was getting good. And he says, I want you to put your tongue out and lick this lollipop. And he goes, now, I want you to tell me the first word that comes into your mind, okay? And he goes, okay. He takes his tongue and he licks that lollipop, and he looks at me and he goes, and smiles and says, sweet. And he had an Ohio State hat on. And I said, yeah, is that what it is? Well, can you tell me what word came in your mind when we had the big Buckeye victory this week? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, sweet. Oh, my God, all the people that were observing just loved that. Was he getting on the bridge and starting to cross the bridge? We think so. The ability to segment syllables into phonemes and all this phonological awareness stuff. They might still have this difficulty to appreciate true figurative language at this age because they're not cognitively at that level of 11 to 13 or 14 of formal operations yet. But when we get to stage 4, when we get to formal operations, cognitive reasoning and thinking, we finally reach the point where children, with typical language, they have the ability to extend language meaning into hypothetical realms, to understand figurative language such as metaphors, similes, and analogies, etc. The ability to manipulate various speech styles that fit a variety of contexts and listeners, and they have to start to get that because, look, you know they're about ready to head to middle school, and you know how good middle school kids are at doing that strategic kind of stuff. Wow. So let's take a look at some metalinguistic difficulties, okay? And I like doing this here. I like doing this because this is very concrete, very good. Some of the classic meta-language difficulties. They are planning for production of statements, questions, paragraphs, stories in speaking and in writing, difficulty making predictions about things, forming hypotheses about things, problem solving, yes or no, is this right, in the strategic language use, not just simple skill-based, but doing it one way or doing it another. That's hard because that's meta. Self-monitoring what they're doing to identify errors and problems so that they can stop those errors and problems and make things more fluent. They have difficulty correcting inefficient approaches, turning into more efficient approaches and using other behaviors to make it all work out. And of course, in phonological awareness, things have difficulty recognizing syllable, word, phrase, and clause and sentence boundaries, both in speech and print. They have difficulty in monitoring, self-correcting, and editing their language that they use in speech or in written form. They have difficulty playing with language, riddles, jokes, rhymes. They have difficulties because those things are not using words for exactly what they mean. They're a little bit more abstract. And they, of course, ultimately, the bottom line, they have difficulty analyzing and talking about language in different ways. These metalinguistic difficulties cause kids havoc in the school curriculum. So what are the needs then? What are some very typical metalinguistic needs? Well, they need more processing time to plan responses and to pre-organize what they're doing. They need you to highlight and explain the underlying schema or structure that fosters planning, predicting, and hypothesizing. When they understand the underlying framework for things, that's critically important. They need strategy training, strategic language training to be able to foster thinking about and problem solving with things in different ways and saying things and using things in different ways. They, of course, need practice in self-monitoring what they're doing. I could do it this way, do it another way, do it this way. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? And evaluating and making adjustments in what they're doing. Wow. Identifying sources of breakdowns, and they need help in identifying sources of breakdowns and correcting inefficiencies. They need learning of phonemic contrasts and syllable boundaries so that they can be more effective in conventions and reading and print. They need, of course, this phonological stuff and linguistic stuff to highlight syllabic structures, word structures, the shape of phrases and clauses, and what are complete sentences. They need practice, of course, in playing with various language components, different words and different word meanings, phrases said one way or said another way, or clauses inserted or not inserted in sign language. They need practice, and this is important, in analyzing and discussing oral and written language. And that includes the meaningful elements, what patterns they are in, the different rule structure and applications they use. These things are the metacognitive and metalinguistic ways the child uses his system to think and learn and make meaning. So let's talk about CELF-5. Okay, I talked a little bit about this background stuff, but I love talking about this because it's like what school is really all about. And when the kids pay that toll at the metalinguistic bridge and they can enter that end of second grade or third grade, able to use their language to think with and operate and use it in multiple different ways, and allows them to learn and become an effective school learner. This is why this is so critical. So, the test objective, major skills assessed, and test overview, okay? CELF-5 Metalinguistics, of course, focuses on metalinguistic awareness, and of course, it talks about things like talking about, analyzing, and thinking about language. That's really what CELF-5 Metalinguistics gets all into, okay? Some of the metalinguistic skills assessed by our test and known to have an impact on academic performance. And I want to go through this really carefully. That is the ability to be inferential, to understand inferences, to relate one thing to another logically and to think about them. Think how important that is. To understand the different meanings and multiple meanings of words used in different ways and different contexts. The ability to use figurative language, the abstract properties of language, understand humor and sarcasm, but to be able to use language in various abstract properties instead of being down and simple and concrete. And of course, the ability to formulate spoken and written sentences that meet cultural demands, expectations for conveying messages, or expressing emotions or opinions, and doing it at age level, and doing it at appropriateness, and doing it to be able to reflect on, is this right or is this wrong? These things are just critical, and there has not really been a test. Most standardized child language tests are not meta. They're all skill-based, and that's why this test is such an improvement. So our test composition, the test overview, CELF-5 Metalinguistics is used to assess metalinguistic skills with 5 standalone tests and to get the age range, 9 to 21-11. Why does it begin at 9? From the end of second grade, beginning of third grade. As they enter that third grade curriculum, and if you really just talk about it, I talk to a lot of competent third grade teachers, and they talk about what the demands of the school curriculum are in third grade. And once we start talking about metacognitive and metalinguistic properties of that, they all go, absolutely. They're not really longer learning just the skills. They're learning these things to do skillfully and to do metalinguistically. Think about and do it. So we have the metalinguistic profile, an overall assessment of metalinguistic properties, the test of making inferences, a test of measuring conversational abilities, multiple meanings, and figurative language. And it's really important for me to tell you this, that it's almost impossible to create a metalinguistic test that can test every practical way kids struggle to be metacognitive and metalinguistic in their curriculum. But it is very practical to have a test that looks at inferential thinking, creative conversational abilities, meaning and manipulating meaning, and the figurative components of it. Because when these properties become diminished, his performance in the school curriculum is going to become diminished, and he's going to struggle to do. Even though he does not, on the skill-based tests, all the standardized tests, he doesn't qualify because he's not absolutely in the low skill disordered range, but metalinguistically, he can't do it, and that is going to destroy him in school. Provides 3 index scores. First, the total metalinguistic score, which is all of these put together, and the metapragmatics index score, and the meta-semantics index scores. We'll talk a little bit more about these in a second. Designed for students who have adequate skill-based linguistic knowledge, but lack the metalinguistic strategic skills needed for literacy in grades 3 and up and really embedded in school curriculum. This is ideal for students with social communication problems, subtle language disorders, and students, of course, on the autism spectrum. So, we've talked a little bit about this, but let's take a look at the tests and everything as we kind of link this together, as we kind of put this together in 2 case studies. Now, I love these case studies because they also allow us to look at a couple really practical things. When you use a standardized test, usually the standardized test does not tell you the things that the child struggles to do, say, make, and use in school. I give all the credit in the world to Dr. Jack D'Amico, who I worked with for years and who taught me that despite all the good work we did creating tests, most of our tests did not do that one thing. It did not. The child is not doing well in school, and it doesn't tell you the things that he struggles to do, say, make, and use. And so you need to have some practical classroom assessment to go along with your standardized assessment to get the ultimate big picture. So let's take a look at some of this. So let's talk about our first case study, and it's all about Kim, case study number 1. She's a 9-year-old girl with reading and writing problems and failing grades in language, arts, and science. Do you know a Kim? I'm sure you do. So let's take a look. Case studies 1 and 2 assess language and communication in context with our CELF-5 ORS. Now, most of you probably are familiar with the CELF-5 ORS, the observational rating scale. The ORS evaluates a student's communication, language, and literacy skills as they are observed in the naturalistic setting of the regular classroom. This is a very practical assessment. The ORS provides ratings of the frequency of occurrence of behavioral characteristics associated with listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And it's a great tool to get you on the road to describe the things he struggles to do, say, make, and use. So, you've seen this. I just have the first page. It looks at listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But here it is. I mean, you take a look at it. This is just the listening part. We have 9 major listening things on here. There's a lot more speaking and reading and writing. There's a total of 40 items. Those are the 40, what we did our research, the 40, and the probably most critical behaviors that kids have struggle with in school. And we has trouble paying attention, following directions, remembering things people say, understanding. These are very practical things. And this happens never or almost never, sometimes, often, always or almost always. And then you have a little thing whether you can click whether this test was the thing was taken by the teacher or a parent or actually filled out by a student. Some of the older students can fill these out themselves. So let's take a look at exactly what ORS does. The ORS assessment approach is a rating scale. It's a checklist and a rating scale. And it's used to collect a performance sample, a summary of the problems that a child has in school. So we start out, when we use this ORS, they have the teacher fill out this checklist. It's wonderful because it's only 2 sides of 1 sheet of paper, and it's extremely practical. But we ask them, because sometimes when a kid's really in bed and they first refer them, they want to fill everything out, but we ask them to select the top 10 problems. Most importantly, because we want to start by looking at the top 10 problems. Select the top 10 problems, and then we follow that by a teacher or parent interview. Then, after we go through the interview with the teacher, especially mostly the teacher, then we do a classroom observation. The clinician goes in and observes and tries to see exactly what that teacher is talking about. And then they have a follow-up meeting with the teacher to discuss the things you've seen and the things you've talked about. Now you'd watch this. You'd watch how we go through this. So what's a performance sample? Now this is simple. 30 to 50 descriptive examples that you basically get of his classroom performance. Usually you get these by having them fill out the ORs and give good examples, and then you have the interview and talk, and you write down, take notes on it, and then you observe the child yourself in context, and you write at least 30 to 50 good descriptive examples of the things the child is struggling to do, say, make, and use. Okay? So, the ORS performance sample, the interview outcomes are this. Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for weakness patterns in the child. We're looking for strength and interest, things he does well, or things he's interested and likes. And then we're looking at something as simple as called learning adjustments, positive learning adjustments. He always raises his hand when he doesn't understand. Now, isn't that a positive learning adjustment? He raises his hand to get clarification. Or he's out of his seat, off task. He bothers others. He's always talking because he isn't on task. Those are all negative learning adjustments. And let me tell you this, as you all know, these are the things that teachers and our kids that have language problems tend to talk about all the time. And these are the negative things that are going on in the classroom that are just so focused about this kid's disorder. So, when we're using this ORS, important considerations. Now listen to this carefully, okay? When we're using this checklist with the teacher to collect and fill it out, and we want to keep things extremely practical. We want to use ORS, the classroom checklist, only 2 pages. Keep it simple. Complexity, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Really, we want to make this stuff so it's efficient and easy to do. Prioritize the top 10 things so it's a place to start where you can focus on where the really needs are. A link to interviewing so that we can talk about, when we build this idea up, as we talk about the stuff of things that we ought to be looking at when we're interviewing to find out the things that will help us when we observe. So we want to build a connection to our own observation so we get a realistic picture of what's going on, and especially some critical things to look at. Then the CELF-5 ORS is really perfect to help you do this. But what we're after is this, the most important things. We're after finding out a few things that we can do with a child extremely well. This is important. When you get a group of people that can focus on the few most important things a child needs and deliver them as a team, you're right going in the right direction. So, a few things done well. Do you know what I mean by that? That means this here. That means when you do a few things well as a team, you focus on functionality, not in therapy, but in context, where it's needed. You focus in on the most important things, the things that are struggling. He's struggling to do the most. You design an intervention system that's not just your therapeutic one. You design an intervention system that's organized with and through other people. You put a system in place that works when you're not there. That's the ultimate of an incredible clinical leader. He's a clinical speech pathologist who can put a system in place that's not just therapy, but it's working when they're not involved. It's at home, in classroom, in school. So therefore, you need to not just test him, you need to know your client well enough to help him. And of course, you've got to get lots of data, lots and lots of data. So let's take a look at this first Kim's ORS. These are some of the things in blue are some of the items on the test. Here's some of the things that Kim had trouble with. Paying attention, that this is often, the A is always, plays with hands, doesn't know what to say, struggles to connect ideas. Look at this, struggles to interrelate words. Next one, explaining what is read. Has very little to say, speaks in short comments. Identifying the main ideas, struggles thinking of meaning. Oh, look at that. Struggles to identify word meanings. Comprehension is poor remembering details. Goes blank, can't remember anything. Following directions was often. Written languages confuse her. Again, trouble with holding words in working memory. Can't remember things. Look at poor grammar. I ran, writes like she talks. Writing complete sentence. She often leaves out subject or verbs. gives fragments instead, has trouble expanding on an answer, writes very little, many fragments, putting words in the right order, voice syntactically. Is winter when winter is cold? That was one of her phrases. Writes short and choppy sentences. Usually writes no more than 3 to 5 words. Often. Maybe missing main words like nouns or verbs. I mean, just look at these here, the kinds of things that you got through ORs and the examples that the teacher gave and talked about. And take a look at our chart. Here's a 2-page chart of our performance sample that we got in the interview with the teacher, and after we got some of the extras that we got in the observation that was conducted by the speech pathologist. Here's all the things that we talked about, and here's how we classify them. Look at how simple it is. We classify them under listening, speaking, social communication, reading, writing, critical thinking. That's the meta property that we talk about. We usually don't use meta around them a lot because meta is kind of the big word. So we use critical thinking, okay? We talk about our meta, that executive functions, whether it's a strength or an interest, whether it's a learning adjustment. And here's the negative ones. Have negative, that's a negative -1. These are minus in learning adjustment. And then P+ is a positive one. Like if you give her a choice, she can do more. That's a positive learning adjustment if you give her choices. And so when you take a look here, and you take a look at all it has poor reading comprehension. Here's the second part of it. 36 observations that we got in our performance sample of her. And when we went through it and looked at all of it, we get poor comprehension, understanding my questions, can't decode words, won't try, seems afraid to make a mistake, has little to say, won't talk, strings sentences, has difficulty thinking of meaning. Oh, I mean, when you start to see these things, we only had 5 in listening. We had a bunch of things, 16 things. 16 when I go back in speaking. Wow, a lot in speaking, a lot of grammatical stuff. And then social communication, reading, 11 things in reading, 7 in writing, 9 things in critical thinking, in the meta things like that, 5 in executive functions, no strengths and interests. We got no strengths and interests on her. And we had 9 sets of things that were in learning adjustments, the things struggles to do in school. But this is just alive stuff. That's what's happening. We got this performance sample, so we're beginning to understand a little bit about her. So let's go quickly to some additional teacher comments. Passive or reticent in communicative style in class gives way to more interactive, communicating child on the playground. The teacher feels she has a passive style. She has a small reading vocabulary and struggles to identify words, avoids reading activities. When I go over here, additional teachers concerned about the student's reading and struggles that her poor reading skills severely limit her participation in school. Other students recognize what a poor reader she is, and she's really identified that way. The teacher feels she's ashamed of her behavior. Oh, my God. Because reading and writing go hand in hand, her writing skills reflect an overall struggle to use print to make meaningful communication. So, some Norm Raffen's assessments on Kim. Look at this. Here's her self. Look, that's not going to qualify her. Those self scores, even though they're low, 84 is about the 16th percentile. They got some low scores, but in almost every school district, they will not require. And so they got a couple following directions were poor. Look at those. Look at that. So, and formulating sentences were poor. And the observating rating scale, listening difficulty and speaking struggles she had. But case number 1, Kim. But look at this, her WISC, 102, 104. So working memory low, but that occurs in a lot of kids with language problems. And then we go on to here. Kim exhibits basic communication skills within normal limits on CELF-5, yeah. But students with language disorder, but they may not have crossed the bridge for metalinguistic awareness. Wow. Her metalinguistic skills, look at this. Metalinguistic skills, 72 on the total meta. That score is severe, moderate to severe range in meta skills. Moderate to severe overall on her. Look at these scores, figurative language 4, conversational skills 5. And so you look at her CELF scores, they're higher, and they're just at the borderline range for difficulty, but her meta skills are poor, and she needs help. So some conclusions about Kim are this here. We need to develop knowledge and expressive use of compound and complex sentences for speaking. We've got to do that. We've got to get her more meta. We need to develop conversation and narrative writing skills so as they apply to descriptive and expository and emerging argumentative genres. We need to develop awareness of multiple meanings and ambiguities so that she can begin to use language strategically, and to develop knowledge of idiomatic and figurative language. We need to be able to get her on the meta language and metacognitive stream so that she will survive in school. Because I'll tell you what, if we don't get her going in that way, she will go gradually downhill. When she gets to middle school, she's going to be in real trouble. So that's Kim. But let's do one more, and let's do Jake. And I got about 12 minutes to do Jake, so let me do it. Jake is a 13-year-old with poor study habits, trouble with social communication. Yes, but he loves this computer. You know a boy named Jack? Let's take a look at Jack. Let's take a look at his CELF-5 score. Look at his, oh my God. Here's his subtest scores, right? It said 4, well look, 4, 7, 10, 7, 7, 7, 7. Look at this. You know they're borderline. You take a look at it. And he's got recalling sentences as a weakness. If you add up all the subtest scores and divide by the number, he comes out with a subtest average of around 7. So anything that's a standard deviation above, that's a 10, would be a relative strength. Anything that's a standard deviation below would be a relative weakness. That's a quick and easy way to figure out a strength and weakness. But take a look at his core score. Look at this. His core score, his standard score was 80. That is the 10th percentile, but in many school districts, that will not qualify him for his receptive and expressive. His receptive language was significantly better than expressive language. Yes, yes. But look at that. 10th percentile, he's borderline. He's in 8th grade. Look how much trouble, oh my God, he's going to have. Where's he going to go? And why didn't he get help earlier? That score, the core language score of 80, is the score that in our research on CELF-5 that we identified is the most sensitive and specific score on the test, standard score of 80. Wow. Sensitivity, specificity, sensitive, most sensitive. Now look at it. It's a meta score. Look at it. 5 on making inferences, 3 on conversational skills. Look at how low those are. Look at that. Like that. And I got metalinguistic, he got just 7. But take a look at the total score. His total metalinguistic index score is 73 plus or minus 7. That is absolutely clearly in the moderate to severe range. And the same thing in the moderate to severe range on the metapragmatic thing. Wow, what a problem he has. And he can't start to use his language as a tool in 8th grade. He's done. He's done. Imagine when he reaches high school, he could easily drop out. Let's take a look. And look at his WISC scores. Again, pretty much average range. Working memory a little low, but then again, he's got language properties that causes things. But look at this. Now here's his case study. Look at this case study. Here are some of the things. Now I put it on here this way here. Here's the interview that we did with his English teacher and another teacher, but mostly the English teacher at first, and some of the problems that he had. And here's this list, and the parts of the list. I'm going to go on and show you how they're scored. But I put these on here on the handout in case you want to try to score them yourself. This is really fun to do and to try to see how well you can put these into listening, speaking, social communication, etc. But when I went through here and I did this like this, look at stuff. Here's some of the things. His writing contains a number of tense and pronoun errors. Short, repetitive written sentences make little sense. Writing is hard to read because it's so small with deformed letters. Very few links between written sentences, no conjunctions. You see that? Look at that. Look at all the right. But they're on here because you can see they have, some of them are writing and they're also critical thinking. Sometimes they're just something other. His communication with teachers is negative and abrupt. That's social. He seems so concrete. Poor, talks about simple things, speaking and social communication and critical thinking. Can't get subtle meanings when he reads. Reading and critical thinking. Look at this stuff. So doesn't remember character names or relationships. Goes off topic. Rarely volunteers to talk. Wow. Sloppy note taker. Rarely completes assignments. Can't distinguish important from unimportant. Doesn't pay attention. Is stubborn. Won't change the way he does things. He doesn't have good study skills. Gets lost. Can't follow directions. Oh, my God. He doesn't know where the study questions are. He doesn't finish what he starts. Gets lost and turns off during lectures. Wow. Take over here. That's page 2 of them. He's hard to have a conversation with. He doesn't edit his work. It's disorganized or sloppy. He acts odd, talks about computers but little else. When he comes up with good ideas, the others won't listen. That's good. It takes him too long to make sense, struggles to get the point out. Rarely socializes with other kids. Has trouble remembering things. Doesn't talk in class. Seems passive, uninterested. I know he's bright. Look at his work on the computer. He doesn't try hard. He plays baseball and talks a lot about sports. Pays attention when he's on the computer. Word processes and finds cartoons on the internet. He's late most of the time. Likes the computer, but not much else. Brings the computer to school. The art teacher thinks he's creative, draws pictures of planes and cars. Will work on the computer, but avoids reading. Boy, but look at this guy. Look at the different things here, the different categories. But when you take a look at him, now we did it one more way, just one more thing we did. Look at this. We took all of these and put them in one other than listening, speaking, social, as we could categorize them, and then we show you how they're also, all these social things, and the other categories that they fall in. Then look, a bunch of writing things, but several critical thinking things, meta things that he can't do, struggles to do, obviously, and all this executive function stuff and how critical thinking and meta skills are so tied to executive functions and being able to operate as a real student. Look at that. And then strengths and interests. He had so many. He had said, good with the computer. He had strengths, things he's good at, likes the computer, likes sports. Some learning adjustments that he can't do. He acts odd, seems passive, doesn't try. So some of the things that he's, like a summary. Study skills, social communication skills are a problem, literacy skills, critical thinking, motivation, organization, knowledge of computers, and sports knowledge is good. But watch this. So here's what he comes down to. This is what Dan comes down to. He comes down to problems with study skills, literacy, social communication, motivation and response, critical thinking, sense of competence. But watch what happens. We put this together. Just look at this. We met with all the middle school teachers. After we did the interviewing, we put all this together. Here is what we came up with Jack. He has these patterns. Study skills. See the different things, completing assignments. Look at that we found. Literacy, struggle with literacy. Look at that. Struggle, really awful with social communication skills. Oh, my God, poor passive communicator. Again, motivated, lack of responsibility and motivation. The teachers don't like him. Metalinguistics, look at the critical thinking stuff he has. And this whole notion about himself, his whole sense of competence. All these things, when we gave this to the teachers, honestly, God, I have to tell you, we gave this chart to the teachers, and they looked at us and said, this is fabulous. This is him. How did you do that? Geez, no one's ever done this way before. Mostly when specialists come and talk to us, they give us test scores. Can you believe that? Gives us test scores. My word. Look at that. We had our meeting with them, and we had the discussion with them, and here's what they came up with. You look at the revised list. I love this stuff. I love it because when the teachers were all in it and they could talk about what did they think were important, they thought this. I bet you didn't believe this. They thought completing and finishing his work, turning it in on time, remembering things, taking notes, using study, adopting a positive affect, relating more effectively with peers, volunteering in class, responding effectively. These study skills and social skills were the number 1 and 2 most important thing, and they were all on this page that they said we can help. And then they talked about, obviously, his trouble with reading and writing is a problem, and we talked to him about the meta properties and why he's not able to do that stuff. And then we had some related areas like motivation and responsibilities. Yes, we did. Sense of competence, yes, we did. But this was just, when we got this from the teachers, we were like, oh my word. They are so right, but they had never, ever had any of them come into a chart like this and had a chance to talk about a kid in middle school with this assessment. So, Jack's present levels of performance, let me read this to you and say, Jack is an 8th grade student at Washington Hunt School. Standardized assessment indicates the following: receptive and